Justin, welcome to the show.
Dr. Vic, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. I love your book. I love the title of it. I feel like that was me years ago, and excited to dive into that and all the other work that you're doing. So I'm ready to get started. So let's talk a little bit about how did you get into what you're doing today? What's the story? What's the background? That kind of, I always say life is like a pinball effect. Rarely do we ever just say, this is how it's going and that's it. It's more of like, we go off one way, we go off another way, and then we eventually will find our way down that journey.
Right.
So what's your story?
All right. I will say that in 2008 is the year I got sober. I was 32 years old. And about 2 years into that, I met a man named Roland Mora, who became my mentor and guide and taught me everything I know about living. And Roland's a character. He's an old, gay, one-eyed Apache Vietnam veteran, and just intimidating and wise, and talked about self-awareness and Zen and finding your meaning in life and meditation and all this stuff. And even though I was 2 years sober at the time, I wasn't finding the answers that I had needed up to that point about being a whole person. But Roland plugged me into a lot of things. And one of the analogies that he used when I first met him, he said that you can go to the top of a skyscraper and throw a rock off the roof. And for a long time, that rock will think that it's flying. It will have no idea that it's falling until it gets almost to the ground. And I was like, that was my life. From the day I was born until I was 32, I was falling and I thought I was flying. And that's a result of environment. I had parents who were emotionally damaged and dealing with their own challenges and didn't know how to be good parents. And they didn't have the tools to give me to learn how to develop emotionally and just be a whole, complete person, right? So I hit the world as an adult with a lot of damage, a lot of trauma, a lot of things missing that I didn't know I was missing. All I knew is that I didn't feel on the inside like everybody looked on the outside. And so I tried to fix that with alcohol. That was my tool, but there's an awful lot of ways that people fix things. Whether it's food or booze or drugs or buying things, shopping, gambling, sex, attention seeking, thrill seeking behavior, there's all kinds of things. And I dabbled in a lot of those things, but none of those things filled the void on the inside. And I didn't understand what was missing until I met Roland. But Roland was a huge analogies guy. And so I sort of have taken that on. And so I created my own analogy. I call it my space analogy. And I like to say that if I was a comet, I was formed in my parents' star system. But because my parents were missing so many things, they didn't have the elements to give me to become a complete and whole being. So when I finally ejected out of their gravity system, I didn't have a lot of the elements that I needed to go form my own star system. So I drifted through space on the trajectory that I was on because I had no way to steer myself, all the way up until I got in close enough to Roland's star system that his gravity could pull me in. And he gave me a lot of elements, and he helped me evolve the ability to self-examine and figure out what I was missing, and then how to go develop my own propulsion system so I could go around the universe finding the things that I needed to finish filling in the gaps. And the beauty of all that is where I am now, as I'm starting to get where Roland was, is that I have enough elements that I can be a more or less whole person, and I have enough left over that I can now give some of those elements to other people who are missing them just like I was. So that's the short version.
I love that. I love that analogy too. It's a different way of the pinball effect, but your own unique way of sharing it. I love that. Do you feel then that and in life, as we're creating our star system, but we're also moving and taking in other elements or going to other people's star system to learn more and then come back to ours? Is that kind of the analogy adding to it, or is that just me messing it all up?
No, that's exactly it. That's, there's a book by Dennis E. Taylor called The Baba Verse. And it's about a guy that just goes around creating copies of himself as an intelligent spaceship and just goes around the universe collecting all kinds of elements and reporting back to Central, and it's a great sci-fi series and I love it. But I really, I identify with that as I am going out, and the internet makes it a great, easy way to do this. I can't imagine doing it pre-internet, but there's so many resources available that I can go out all over the place and learn things and listen to podcasts and find people who are on the path that I am trying to go down and learn from them and bring it all back and help create the home system and make it better and stronger. And it never ends. It's not a point where I'm like, okay, I'm done.
No, and I think that's the beauty of it is like it never does. I know, because when my mindset is once I get to a certain level, once I get to this pace, then it's like, okay, I just do this and that's it. And then you get there and you're like, no, there's more, there's deeper. You can go farther, wider. It just never ends. As far deep down as far high up. It's always there's endless amounts.
That's it. Infinite.
One of the things of the journey I always ask, because my background is in chiropractic, neurology, and those kind of things. And I have a background in energy medicine. And so understanding like addictions, I had my own, everybody has their own, we all humans, we do addictive behaviors. We're all addicted to something. It's a distraction to get away from that. The thing we really need to work on anyhow, deep inside. And I've always said, I've been interviewed on this before, and I've talked about this on my own podcast, on my podcast, where I discussed that the addiction is to get to a feeling or the vibration of where you want to be. It's like that false high, if you want to call it, right? You get there, oh yeah, this is it, I'm here. And then it goes away and reality comes back, right? And then you're like, oh crap. Was that kind of that feeling too for you? Was it because I mean, I always tell people, some people go, well, this drug is really bad. And I'm like, it's not the drug. It's not that the drug is bad. They're just using that to get to the feeling. If we can solve that, then we solve whatever, because it could be anything that shows up.
And that's the whole problem, is that there are 1,000 answers to my problem, but only one of them is a long-term solution. And I've cycled through a lot of temporary solutions. And, long before I ever discovered alcohol, which was a great tool in the beginning, but long before I discovered that, the only tool I had was books. I grew up in a television-free household. My folks didn't believe in TV. They didn't believe in movies. And so the only way for me to escape from my reality, and I was not happy with my reality at all, was to read books. And so, people raise their eyebrows when I say that I read books alcoholically, but I really did. Like I got the award from the school library for checking out the most books every year throughout my entire, school history, all the way up to high school. I would read 150 to 200 books a year. And it wasn't because I loved the books, which I did. It was because it got me out of right here, right now. But, like all things, when I moved on to alcohol and drugs and trying to, pursue women inappropriately, it was all seeking that external validation, trying to find somebody to accept me. And, I didn't understand that was the motivation behind my behavior. But the more I learned about myself, and I've been through a bunch of therapy, which has really opened my eyes to the why behind the what. In recovery from alcoholism, I learned all about the what, but I still didn't understand the why. And so when I really examine my belief system that I have about myself, like who is Justin B. Long and why is he the way he is, I can take situations that happen current day and take the feeling that I have from that negative feeling about myself and go back to my childhood and find situations where I felt that as a little kid and form certain beliefs about myself. And, for example, my dad always had 1,000 projects going on, and I was in charge of doing a lot of things. I always had chores to do. And one of my things was stacking firewood. And I would have to come home from school every day, and he would cut the firewood to length. I would have to split it and stack it. And this system that he had, there were 2 poles in the ground, like 15 feet apart. And I had to stack firewood in between those poles all the way to the top. There was a wire at the top, and the firewood had to be even on the front and the back, and it had to be all the way across the top with no gaps. Like it had to be a perfect stack, right? And when my dad would come home from work, we would go out and look at it, and he would make me count all the pieces of wood that were sticking out of line more than an inch or so, and I would get a swat for all those. And it's firewood. It's not like it's all of the exact same length, right? And also, it's stacking a mile of firewood every day. It's a mindless task. So I would drift off daydreaming and thinking about whatever book I'm trying to get out of right here, right now. So I'm fantasizing about anything. And I would invariably have pieces of wood sticking out of that pile. So every day I had a task to do, and I would do that task. And my dad would come home and punish me for the shortcomings of it. And so, that times 150,000 times, I learned that no matter what I do and no matter how hard I work, I'm going to fall short and I'm going to get punished. And, that leads me to believe that I'm not good enough. And I carried that understanding unconsciously into my adult life, to where I had a giant problem with authority. I went into the army thinking that I had a problem with my dad. And then I found out everybody there was in charge of me and they punished me for everything, no matter what I did. And that just reinforced that belief system that no matter what, Justin is going to lose. And so when I became a civilian and I started working jobs, like day one, I hate my boss. And anybody around me that criticizes what I'm doing, my coworkers, I am instantly toxic. I hate everybody. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to prove to you that I'm better than you think I am. But no matter what, I still come up short. Because I believed that I wasn't good enough. I never understood that it wasn't what everybody else thought of me. It was what I thought of me. That's what makes me act out in all these ways. Right. And it took me a long time to understand that it's not the external stuff that matters. It's the way I feel about myself. And so all of those external things that I tried, whether it was impressing people, trying to get that approval from my dad, that's where I was going with the firewood thing, is that, I wanted his approval. I kept trying over and over every day for years. And I carried that into adulthood, always seeking approval and validation and needing my boss to pat me on the back every time I did something, every 15 minutes, to say, Justin, that was fantastic. And of course that never happens. That's unrealistic. Nobody does that. And then I would feel like, if you're not telling me I'm great, then you're ignoring me and I must suck. And that just reaffirms my self-belief. And I'm going to go home and get drunk until I feel better about it. But eventually getting drunk doesn't work anymore, right? That feeling of satisfaction that I could get after 4 or 5 beers and be okay with me, it stopped working. Then it had to be 10 or 12. Then it had to be 25 or 30. And eventually, my body can't handle doing that. And it's not working and I'm miserable all the time. So yeah, it absolutely fails no matter what it is.
And I can relate 100% with you on that, because I had a dad who, it wasn't the physical side. It was more of the verbiage, where no matter what I did, no matter how proud of my work was or whatever accomplished, there was always a comment that would put that down,
Mm-hmm.
or I didn't do it right, or I missed this, or look who else is doing better, or whatever it was. It was always something. Like, it was, and no matter what it was, he would always nitpick something out. And it created a negative. It made me not value my work anymore and look at myself in the same perspective, where it's like, maybe I need to seek, I want to show and now prove to him, right? I want to prove, again, authorities. I love how you brought up, like, against authorities. I'm like, yeah, me too. I don't like authority to a certain degree. Not that I have anything against them. It's just having authority over me. And I think that,
Mm-hmm.
but I appreciate that journey, because it made me become an entrepreneur. I didn't want to work for somebody. I don't want to be answering to nobody except myself. And I appreciate the, afterwards, going through all that, looking back. But it's one of those things where then you start seeking for else, and you look at, and mine wasn't, my addiction wasn't alcohol or things like that, but I had other things that I seeked. It was more of the women. How can I want a woman to be memorized by me. I want her to be like, holy cow, this guy is absolutely amazing. But
Yep.
I didn't realize till I went to go talk to someone, where they're kind of going, you're setting yourself up for massive failure when you do that, because you put yourself so high on a pedestal. Once you make a mistake, don't they frown upon you? And then they start calling you out on your faults. And I was going, dang it, that's how I created that, huh?
Yeah. But the other problem is that, if you manage to woo 10,000 women, at the end of the day, that validation only lasts for a short time. And from that same person, it doesn't matter anymore. You got to go find another one, and you got to go find another one. You got to find another one.
It's just like anything else, right? You got to have more and more of it to keep holding up until you hit that rock bottom. And then all of a sudden you start questioning things,
Yeah,
and you
that's
have to
it.
make that shift. And I think you brought this up. We talked a little bit about this before we got on, where we're talking about our, I would call this my insecurities, right? My insecurities of what I have, and not valuing myself, my worth, the knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, and I can learn and grow, right? Like your dad, you made a mistake with the wood. It's just wood, right? Who cares? But you, as a child at that point, even though it was like that, this took on a bigger level in your life. just like the things that I was getting critiqued on were very minute stuff. It may have been the way I cleaned something, or it might have been, XYZ, schoolwork, whatever it may be. And it's like, those weren't like the biggest things in the world. There's other, things that matter more. But for me at that time in my life, that implemented things to set me up for later down the road to create some bigger issues.
Oh yeah. And it's because you develop your value system by what you have to look at, the examples it set, right? Like I totally created my value system by what my dad thought was important. And even though I liked reading, my dad wasn't a strong reader and writer. He thought it was all a waste of time. And he would ridicule me for that constantly. You need to be out working, doing something. And my dad, I became an alcoholic, but my parents also, both of my parents grew up with dysfunctional emotional households. And while neither of them drank, they both exhibited those same types of behaviors that you develop when you have that. And so my dad developed workaholism. Like he felt like if he wasn't working 24 hours a day, that, he was, wasting his time or whatever. So he would work all day at work and come home, and, he had an endless list of things that had projects that he was going to work on. He had stuff out in the garage. He had the car that was broke down. There's firewood, everything. And so he would work until supper time. We would come back in and eat supper and then go back out, and he would stay in the garage till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, sometimes midnight. And I, despite the fact that I rejected my dad so hard, I still find myself working 7 days a week. And if I sit down, I don't even own a television. And if I sit down to do nothing for 30 minutes, I have to coach myself through that because I feel guilty about it, which is insane, right? It is totally unreasonable for me to work every waking moment of the day. And thank God I have people in my life today that help point that out. My wife is very plugged into my challenges and helps me when I don't realize what I'm doing. My therapist and I talk about this all the time. I have a note on my desk right here. My post-it note, this is from my therapist. It says, I am worthy of the fun that is necessary to lead a healthy life. Like I have to read that every day to remember it's okay for me to stop working and play a game of hearts for 20 minutes on the computer, because, that stuff gets ingrained in you as a child. And if you don't ever question it, it just becomes normal. And even when you do question it, some of this stuff is so hard to overcome. Like it just takes constant self-evaluation and self-awareness to scan what am I doing and why am I doing it? Like that stuff gets ingrained.
Something I'm working on right now, and I don't know, it may become a book down the road, but it's all about the cultural programming of our minds and cultural and the programming of just our parents and the words and the verbiage. And one of the biggest and easiest cues of that is when we catch ourselves saying, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And anytime you say that word should, it's not you talking. It's
right.
Most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, it's either your culture, your parents, friends, a belief system of someone else's. Because you and I have very parallel lives. Like I'm the same way. I used to be a workaholic I would work to N hours. I come home from a long day in the office. I'll have dinner with my girlfriend at the time. And then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, I got work to do. I got to do research. I got to study. I got to get this stuff done. I got to get that done. And she'd be like, why are you working, 16, 18 hours a day, 5, 6, you never stop. And to the day, she's always like, when are you going to slow down? I said, well, you notice I got better. I'm like, I still do things. There's a lot of work around to do the house and stuff, but I'm always making sure I'm moving, but there's different reasons for it now. Before I was avoiding something. Now it's more of like, I want to get outside and I want to work on the landscaping because it's good physical labor. I want to get good sun. It's good for my health. And I enjoy being with nature. So I'm still doing things, but it's more of that element of enjoying the process in it. But it's tough. So like for me, I still get a lot of should-haves. I should be doing this because I'll tell my wife, she's very supportive. I'm so grateful for her because I grew up playing video games. I love video games when I was a kid. It was my gateway, right? The way to escape my world is I can go become somebody and act like I'm playing them. And from time to time, I like to do that with like a baseball game, or I'll put my name in and I'll put my buddies in there and I'll act like we're playing, like creating a whole new reality. But I don't do it often. My wife is like, you don't play it much. You do it maybe once every 3 months, but you enjoy it. Why don't you do it more? Well, honey, I got these things to do. I got to be reading. I got to be doing this. I have to do that. And then she's like, but you need to learn to slow it down and take time. How do you
Right.
become more efficient with that to not let that negative self-talk happen? Is it a post-it note like you were sharing? What are some methodologies that you've learned over time to learn how to enjoy and embrace things more and not get so caught up into the program that we've had growing up?
It's very challenging, you know, and I have that same thing. My wife and I own an equine veterinary clinic, and so I run the business side of that. I'm the bookkeeper. I pay the bills. I run the errands. I go haul horses in emergencies and all that stuff. But I also build and manage websites as a side business, and I also write books. And like I filled my life up with all of these things before I really understood where my value came from, right? And so I I created a system that takes up every minute of every day, and and now over the last couple of years, you know, I recognize more what I'm doing. I'm able to be more deliberate with how I spend my time, and I've been taking things off of my plate. So um, I've learned to delegate. I've learned that, you know, I've created a lot of systems that create passive income, which allows me to afford to pay other people to do some of the tasks that don't require my very best time, right? So really valuing my time highly and understanding, you know, when I'm 80 and I look back over the course of my life, what am I going to what am I going to be proud that I spent my time doing? And it's not the menial nonsense stuff. So I've tried to take all of that stuff off my plate and pay other people to do that, and only spend my time doing things that are working towards my big goals. And the other thing I'm doing is trying to create awareness in, and this is the hard part, is training myself to break old habits, create new habits, and train myself to not say yes when people ask me to do things. You know, that people pleaser aspect, that and a lot of this is just, it's old behavior, but it's still habits that I don't recognize, that I'm going to say yes when somebody asks me to do something because I want them to think well of me. And after I've said yes, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I don't do that anymore. But then it's too late, right? But trying to stop being a yes man and saying yes, I will do anything that anyone wants me to do, and learning how to say no is hard, and learning that no is a complete sentence and I don't have to explain myself is even harder. But I tell you, it is so freeing. It is so unbelievably freeing when someone says, Justin, can you go do this? You know, you got a truck. Would you mind coming over this weekend and doing this and this? And I'd be like, no, I can't do it. I'm sorry. And you know what? That's the end of the sentence right there. I don't have to say it because here's all of the really important things that I'm doing with my time. No, it's because no, that doesn't fit into my day. And I'm sorry. There are 800,000 other people in this town with a truck. You can rent one. There's a way to get it done without me. So, you know, I don't need to sacrifice myself in order to make someone else's day go a little bit easier every time. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to be of service, because I do, but it's my responsibility to myself to be conscious of what I'm doing and be deliberate with how I'm spending my time, rather than just being reactionary. Uh, there's a The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, probably my favorite book series of all times. If you're not familiar with it, it's a space story, but there's a dead planet. I think it was called Magrathea or something like that. It's one of those words you never hear said out loud, so I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's a dead planet. The people have been extinct for a million years, but they had computer systems and everything else, and they had a missile defense system in place, and it was all run by computers, and so it's all still going. And so when this spaceship got too close, these missiles launched to defend the planet, even though the people that's defending have been dead for a million years, right? And I really relate to that because I have all of these automatic reactions that take place to defend, you know, 10-year-old Justin, who doesn't need to be defended anymore, because I've come to terms with all of these quote unquote truths that I had about myself and realized that they're not true. And I've redefined my understanding of who I am. And but sometimes those missiles still fire, and so part of my process today is catching those missiles before they make it to their target, right? Because I don't need to say yes, I don't need to defend myself, I don't need to attack people for criticizing me, I don't need to resent someone who has authority over me. I don't need any of those things, but those are still knee-jerk reactions in some way. So a lot of what I'm doing is trying to undo that stuff and be conscious of that behavior when it gets triggered.
So, what is a process that you utilize, or something that you can share with people? Because 95% of our life is run by our subconscious mind.
Hmm.
And so, those are all the old programming that happens age 7 and under, where usually most of it, you can still program it after time too. But a lot of those are deep rooted stuff, like things we're kind of talking about here with our own lives and journey. How do you become more aware of those things, or what are some tips that you may have to help an individual or listener who may be going, yeah, that sounds like me. And then, I love how you brought up those missiles still fire from time to time. I appreciate that because I know that for a fact myself. I'll look at my wife and be like, you think, even as a coach, I coach entrepreneurs and stuff. And I always laugh where I'll be like, I just had a conversation with this about to a client, and I'm literally giving them advice that is actually more advice for me that I'm making that one mistake that I mastered. You think you master. That's why I don't like saying I mastered something, because I'm like, it still shows up from time to time where you're like, yeah, I did that. Son of a gun. I thought I got this over and done with.
Yeah.
And I don't beat myself up. I laugh about it. I'm like, it's part of life. I'll get better at this eventually. But what are some things that people can do, or what you would recommend to kind of help break, get out of that subconscious programming, or become more aware of what's there and how to
Mhm.
make those shifts?
I love that you can laugh at yourself. That is so important. And it takes a lot of work to get to that point. So I absolutely recognize that. But one of the biggest tools that I got from Daniel Goleman, the guy that wrote Emotional Intelligence. And he talks about when you get triggered, when you're getting angry, he calls it, my amygdala has been hijacked. And for whatever reason, that phrase really stuck with me. Like that's something, and I know that feeling. I know that the instant that I start getting upset, it's like a physical sensation in my head. Like I know I'm getting mad, right? And so what I have been working on for years now is recognizing that earlier and earlier and earlier. But the second that I recognize that I'm upset is acknowledging the emotion, recognizing my amygdala has been hijacked. I'm triggered about something. I'm upset about something. And taking, whether it's 1 second, in the beginning, it was 2 minutes for me to go down the trail of figuring out what it is, right? So, for example, I'll give you a good example here. At our vet clinic, uh, our office manager found a new thing called scratch pay or something like that, a new payment option for people that need to make payment plans, right? And she talked to my wife about it. My wife owns the practice, totally within her rights to say, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. And me as the CFO, I didn't get included in that conversation because I wasn't at the clinic when it happened, right? I work from home a lot. And so I found out about it the next day, and she was talking about, I need you to sign this form so we can get scratch pay going. And the assumption was made that my wife had come home and talked to me about it, but that didn't happen. And so I was instantly triggered. I was angry. I was hurt. I was like, what are you talking about, scratch pay? Nobody's talking. I'm the CFO. How are you making decisions without including me about this? And I didn't say that out loud, but that was what instantly rushed into my head. And I was able to recognize that my amygdala has been hijacked. Why why am I triggered? Why am I angry? And when I follow that feeling down, I know that it makes me feel left out. I feel like I'm not important. I feel like they're placating me the rest of the time. I can just make this as huge as it could possibly be. And the reality is that you know that's a missile firing. That is a little Justin feeling like he doesn't matter because nothing that he does gets acknowledged, right? And so the second I realized that, I'm like, oh, that's not true. That's a false feeling because I do matter and my contributions do matter, and I bring a lot of value to this organization. And they made a decision that I didn't need to be involved in anyway. I would have said yes. It's not like it changed anything. They were really saving me time by not wasting 20 minutes of my day going through this conversation. So, and then I can come out the other end of that, and I'm not mad anymore. I realized that, it was a false feeling and a false reaction, and I can do a manual override and say, yes, I am happy to sign this form and we can get scratch pay going. If you got a minute, maybe you could tell me about it, because I didn't get it. I didn't get the details, but tell me what scratch pay is. Let's do this. And that one could happen in 4 seconds in my head, because I've been doing this quite a while now. But in the beginning, it's, as I'm screaming and ranting and raving and throwing something across the room, realizing, oh my God, I'm hysterical right now. I need to stop and evaluate this. And maybe that's where it starts. Maybe you don't even recognize it until after it's over, and then you're in the hangover stage of anger or whatever. Most of my stuff comes out as anger, even though it's not anger on the inside. That's just how my dad taught me, because that's the only thing he ever showed, right? And it's the only emotion that I ever got any exposure to. So it's recognizing when that's happening. And sometimes it's uh, well after it's over, and someone else is saying, do you think you overreacted a little bit? And then I examine that, and I create that behavior. Every time I get upset, whenever it is that I recognize it, I examine it and try to find the feeling behind it, and determine if that's a true feeling or a false feeling, and what the truth of the matter is. And the more I do that, the better I get at it, the earlier I detect it. And it's a continuous improvement thing. So, 2 or 3 years into that, then I can do that in 3 seconds in my head on a good day. And it doesn't happen every time. Sometimes I still lose my shit, and I have to go back and apologize and say, this happened, and I'm sorry. I'm working on that. And I hope that you don't hold it against me and give me a chance to improve. But it's just creating that constant self-evaluation every time.
And I love how it gets easier over time, right?
It does.
And it's one of the things where I always tell people, you don't want to, whatever, some people are like, oh, here I did, I reacted this way again, I can't believe it. I'm like, it's fine. You just be more subtle. You brought up something I think that's really powerful, is the
Mm-hmm.
knowing, hey, I'm getting this feeling. Okay, this must mean this. All right, great. And if we can get more into our bodies, as I always tell people, we have this body for a reason. And it's actually, as a chiropractor, I always try to teach my patients, like, when you have like a symptom showing up, whether it's just coming into the office or you've been with me for a while, and then the symptom comes back, or you have an issue that shows up, I'm always like, that's the way of the body trying to get you to be present. You're doing too
Mm.
much, or you're too overstimulated. And it's a way just to say, hey, subtle way. Because if you ever pay attention to the body, if you ever had an issue with something, you'll always notice it's subtle for a little bit, like a little cue here, a little cue there. Like when I get someone who comes in and it's usually these guys are bigger than me, and they'll come in and they're like, I was picking up my son's Lego, I can't move. They're almost crawling into the office. And I was like, man, that Lego had to be so heavy, But then I'll be like, I'll walk them through a process, because most men are like, and it's mostly males will do this, where they're just like, yeah, no, I just be out of pain, I'm good. It's just this one thing I did. And I'm always like, hold on, it's accumulation. And we'll walk them through it, where I'm like, you ever had lower back pain where it was just like a day, or it just was like a dull ache, or you had like a little something? Well, I had it once in a while. It was nothing though. Yeah. How about, did you ever have your
Mm-hmm.
back go out? It's gone out a couple times, but it wasn't major. I lay on the floor for a day, do some stretches, I'm back to normal. And I was like, yeah, all those things were cues of trying to let you know that, hey, you're overstimulating, you're wearing down the body, you're overstimulating the nervous system, it's breaking down. And so the point I'm trying to make is that if we can learn to get more into our body, like you're kind of saying, like feeling wise and all that, this can actually be a tool to be used to help us in our lives in so many different ways.
Oh, absolutely. And feelings, I think feelings is really at the center of almost everything. And especially for men, and the world of toxic masculinity that we've all grown up in, is that, I was under the impression that it was never okay to have feelings. The only feeling I'm allowed to have is rage, but I have 26 other ones, and I didn't know what to do with those. And that's part of the challenge that I had growing up and launching into the world as an adult, is that I had all these feelings and I didn't know what to do with them. And I didn't know that it was okay to feel those feelings. And I've had to train myself that, it's okay to be happy. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be excited. It's okay to be disappointed. Put a chemical into my body to change the way that I feel when I have a feeling. I mean, I did that with cigarettes too, but like if I got excited, I would smoke a cigarette. If I got mad, I would smoke a cigarette. And when I got home, from work, then I would do that with cigarettes and alcohol. But no matter what the feeling was, I tried to change it with a chemical or a distraction of some sort, whether it was a movie or a book, just any way to stop feeling what I'm feeling right now, because I didn't know how to feel or how to deal with those emotions. But, emotions are the same across the board for everybody. Like, we've all got them. And the more we acknowledge them and talk about the fact that, yes, I am a man, and it doesn't make me unmanly to have all of these feelings, that I think the healthier we can be as a society and with each other in our relationships with each other. It's not a measure of who's the toughest and who can take the most pain before they fall apart, because at the end of the day, everybody's still going to end up falling apart. And what purpose does that achieve? Right? Nothing. And it's, you don't see the old guys who were the super tough guys that, making it to 90 years old, because they all die young because they beat themselves to death trying to show how tough they were. Right? I don't, I don't have that anymore. Thank God. And I'm glad I don't, but I did. I had it for a long time. And, trying to outdrink everybody else and show, just how much of a jerk I can be. I can be a bigger jerk than you are. And, maybe that'll make girls like me and men respect me. But when I started accepting myself and learning to figure out who I am and what I like to do and embrace that and just be it, everything changed in my life. I learned from Roland that it's okay to experiment with things, figure out what you do like. So I found out I like painting. I like writing. I like playing music. I formed a band. We made an album. Like, it was a good time. It didn't go anywhere. It flopped. Nobody ever heard it outside of our living room. But you know what? I had a great time doing that. And I developed so much confidence in being myself rather than trying to hold up all this facade of what I thought everybody else wanted me to be, that when you're confident in who you are and you're true to yourself, then you don't need to seek that external validation. You don't need to do all the things that are destructive in order to feel okay about yourself, because you're not measuring yourself by other people's opinions. And that's so freeing. Like, it's unbelievably important to feel the feelings, to acknowledge the feelings, to own the feelings, and to not worry about what other people think about those feelings.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too about men, right? I think we're coming to a movement though with men where we're becoming more whole. Some people say, well, men are becoming more feminine energy, where we're opening up our
Hmm.
emotions. And I'm like, I don't like to get into feminine masculinity. I used to back in the day talk more about that, but now I'm more like we're just becoming more whole as human beings
Right.
and understanding it's okay. And I think you brought up a lot. I love how you were like, yeah, my band, we had a band, it was a lot of fun. Didn't go anywhere, but it was fun. And I think that's a critical point, right? Especially for your upbringing, right? Probably the old Justin would have been like, look, we did this, but we didn't go anywhere. So it was not even worth it. This was all not, down the drain. I don't know if you would say that. I
Oh,
know
yeah, I
I would
did.
probably have said that, right?
I did.
My
I had to coach myself through that. This is not a failure.
but it comes to a point of, like I had to learn. I do woodworking for fun. I found that I actually have fun with it. I'm not
Mhm.
great at it. I'm getting better, but it's amazing. I see my growth over the last couple of years when I do have time to dabble into it. And it's I told it's one of the things where it's my art, it's my creativity. I mean, it's something is just it could be framing a wall or putting something together. Or my wife says, hey, I really love this bench. I'll be like, I got that. Show me a picture. And then I'll put it together, or a planter
Mhm.
box or XYZ. And it's like, wow, I can do this. This is fun. And the reason why is I don't have somebody critiquing me, or I
Yep.
used to value someone else's opinion. Now, if like my dad comes by and he sees that, what would you do that for? Hey, I wanted to do it. That's why. I
That's
sit
right.
there and enjoy it, and more having that conversation with him rather than like, oh, dad, and I have to appease to him anymore. We have a different relationship now, in a better way. But it's one of those things where I think that's the key point that you brought there. And I think that's element, especially for males. If males, you're listening, it's not all about, and I was this way. It was all about the bottom line. What am I making? If I put my energy into something, something that has to come out of it.
Mm,
And I'm starting to learn now over time that it doesn't need to be that way. What do
it
I
really doesn't.
enjoy? What meets my needs? And then what am I doing that I enjoy? Because you're talking about the element of life. And I love how you brought that up, where here's these guys who act tough and strong. Yeah, we don't see them in their 80s and 90s. We rarely
Right.
do.
Yep.
My grandfather was like that, a very tough Italian male. And, he passed away at 70, early 70s. And in our family, we live longer. I mean, a lot of my family members live into their 90s, but he was a certain man, a certain way. He didn't get past that age. First heart attack at 45. So it already started to, that lifestyle started to affect them. So it was one of those things where I kind of appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's a huge point for the listeners, for the males specifically, to hear that message.
Absolutely. And I don't know how your experience has been, but for me, once I got to a certain income level where the basic needs are met, the monetary reward for my efforts becomes much lower, and the quality of life reward is much more important. And, like, I'm not saying that you can be, a millionaire and be miserable, but like, I don't know how that's possible, but I know a lot of people do it all the time, right? But money isn't the thing that makes all the rest of it worthwhile once the basic needs are met. And I didn't understand that for a long time either. My parents had a very weird relationship with money, and like, we were always poor, and no matter what, there was never enough to do anything. And I don't know, man. It's just, I thought that getting money would solve a lot of those problems for me, and it didn't. But I'm not wealthy by any means, but I make enough to do what I want to do. And like, I'm not driven by the urge to make more. That's not what I'm trying to do with my side ventures. I'm trying to, I started the website building business to fund my books until they started being self-sufficient. And now I just use that money to go on a backpacking trip once a year. Me and my wife are going to Yellowstone in August. And I think it's just the experiences and the joy that you get out of life that really is what makes it worthwhile.
And I think that's what's happening in the shift in the world. Because I was the same way. I thought I had to get to a certain level of income to be, and my income determined my value. And
Hmm.
then I got to that level, and all of a sudden I look back and I'm going, if this is how it is, I don't want it. Like, not that I
Yeah.
don't want it, the money or anything like that. I just didn't want to the stress and everything else I was doing to get to that level. And I started going, okay, hold up. I really need to do a reality check. And what is it that I really want to do? What's the passion that or the purpose I have, and what I want to make a change? And I want to be paid handsomely for it, but at the same token, it's not going to be about the money, and I'm not going to be driving to get the higher levels. Even though I do want to see things grow, don't get me wrong, but I want to make sure I'm making an impact. I want to make sure what's the things that I had to have a very hard conversation about this. What are the things that are going to leave a footprint? Because the
Hmm.
amount of money I make, unless I'm a billionaire, one of the top in the world, that's the only footprint I'm going to make with that. I mean, they have businesses and stuff that leave that, but I'm like, what's a footprint that I can leave that's going to be way more powerful than any dollar I make? And it got to a point where, I mean, when I made that decision, I made changes in my business where we dropped 50% financially in a year. I mean, in 6 months. You're a CFO,
Hmm.
that's not a good thing to do. But we changed our purpose, we changed our direction, and I said, I don't care what it takes to get back to that level, but I want to be doing it in the way that I enjoy. I want to work way less, but I want to be more impactful with my time because I want to do other things. And that's when I started doing my podcast like this. I started getting into coaching, getting into the mindset world, doing classes because I love the teaching aspect of the mind and everything I learned. I want to be like, okay, how can I share this with others? Because I've transformed my own life in so many ways. How can I do that for others? So yeah, there comes a point. I think the it's been a while since I've read this research, but I think it's like 70,000 or 71,000, maybe even 72. They found that like level of happiness rises, and then right around that mark,
Just plateaued.
it pretty much plateaus. I mean, it does still
Mm.
increase, but it's statistically inefficient or statistically exclusive. Forgot the word they use, but
Insignificant.
insignificant. There we go. Yes,
Yeah.
and to where it's very little change whatsoever.
You hit the nail on the head. It's that you found your purpose. And I think that for me, I didn't have a purpose almost the entirety of my life. I had no purpose. I went to work and I came home and I paid the bills. And that's existing. And I think it's horrible, but I think that's how the vast majority of people live their lives. They don't have a purpose. They don't have anything that they're passionate about. And for me, you know, exact same thing. Writing this book, trying to share what I've learned with other people, trying to make people become aware that it doesn't have to be this way. You can be happier, you can be more fulfilled, but it's all about finding a purpose. And you found your purpose, I found my purpose, and that is what really drives the satisfaction. You can't measure it with money, you can't measure it with stuff. Like, it's all about doing what you think is important and meaningful, and will hopefully have a positive impact on the world, right? Like, I'm hoping to improve someone else's life through my book. I'm hoping that I've got another book series called The Adventures of the Horse Doctor's Husband, and it's all just stories about, crazy horse adventures that I've been on with my wife. And I have found that my audience for that book is older women who had horses when they were younger, and it brings them joy to just read these things and takes them back to their childhood when they were active with these things. And so just taking a little bit of time to write that down has had a really positive impact on thousands of elderly people's lives. And I get so much satisfaction out of that. I'm not making much money from it, but the knowledge that I made somebody else's life a little bit better for a few days is awesome. Because I will tell you, in my history, I've made a lot of people's lives worse, and I feel like I've got some ground to make up on that. And so this is me leveling out the table a little bit, trying to add some positive stuff to the world. But I love that you're talking about that sense of purpose. That's so important.
I think so. It gives you that sense of like that freedom to know that you're not it's not, again, it's just not that next level. And I know, like, my wife and I are going through another recheck on things. Like, things have been really good in our life. We've been very blessed, even through COVID. We our business has grown through
Mm-hmm.
COVID, and all these other things. And I look and we're like, okay, let's use COVID. Let's not just be like most individuals who are just trying to survive through it. Let's look at this and go, hey, how can we grow from this? What can we really grasp and take the lessons of what really matter? We already know our values in certain things. Let's recheck all our life and see what is really important to us, what really matters to us, and then let's create that.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife's like, I love being with animals. That's why I love horses so much. Her dad has 5 horses. And she's like, I would love to have more animals, farm animals. I love to have more, we have chickens. And she's like, I like to get maybe a cow and, take milk and start making different things with it. And I'm like, beautiful, let's do that. And she's like, I'm like, we'll figure out ways to create income to support that. So that way you can have that. And again, creating value, making sure we're doing something. Because in my mind, it used to be, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, as long as I'm making money to make that happen, great. But then I lost out in the end.
Right.
Now it's all about, what do I like to do? How do I create value? And I tell her this, well, if you want to do this and you want to make the money to support this, what is something you enjoy that you want to do, that you get inspired by, that we can go ahead and create a business out of or do something with? And that way, I don't care about how much money you may make, whatever. As long as you're making the money to support what you want to do and it makes you
Mm-hmm.
happier, I'm all for it. Why? Because if she's happier, more vibrant, and being more feeling like she's giving to the world and she feels good about herself, she will do that in our marriage. She'll do that with her family and all the rest that follows down that path. And that's kind of the critical thing, how we look at things.
Absolutely. And the other important thing in that is that, especially when you're on a path of growth and self-improvement, your life changes constantly, and it's really important to do that check-in every once in a while, because you evolve so fast you don't realize, like, I am so different than I was a year ago. When I look at the beginning of COVID, like, I have learned so much about myself, and a lot of my answers to these same questions has changed, but especially from 5 years ago, like, not night and day. 10 years ago, like, it's not even on the spectrum. So it is really important to do that check-in.
Oh, it is. I mean, even with my coaching biz, I kind of like put it to a halt for a minute, because I was like, I found out that what the coaching business I was creating was more of what people were doing and mentors of mine were doing, but it wasn't me. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I told my wife, she's like, you're going to stop this? What about you're making money, you're doing really well with it. I said, no, I'll just stop taking new clients for now. I'm not going to focus on growing it. I'm going to keep who I have and work with them. And I'm going to revamp this. And I have a date of when it's going to happen, because I got some things in the way before I get there. Right. I'm not letting that workaholic come in.
That's right.
But it's one of the things where I'm reevaluating, going, it's fun, but it's not me. And I want to make it more me and how I want to leave my mark with it. And so I told her, I said, at this day and this month, I'm going to go ahead. We'll have some time, and I'm going to be able to take a month to just unwind, refocus on everything, and then go, okay, next month, start creating, and then say, okay, here we go. This is how I want to move forward with everything and take it from there.
Yep. Are you a goals guy? Do you set out goals for day, week, month, year?
I used to. The
Yep.
only reason why I don't do it anymore is my ego got in the way too much. And so what that did, because remember, I beat myself up way too much. And if I don't hit something, then I think I'm a failure, regardless
Uh-huh.
how close I got. If I was like, I remember I set a goal. I was like, I remember I was in my business. I was like, I'm going to double the income in 1 year. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's crazy. I'm like, no, I'll do it. If people can 10X it, why can't I? I came up to 88%. I grew my income in that
Oh,
1 year.
that's
And I
awesome.
looked and I said, failure.
Yeah.
And everyone's
Yeah.
like, what's wrong with you? You chose what you wanted to make and you got close to that. And I said, yeah, but it wasn't it. I didn't hit the goal. And they're like, that's not the purpose of it. I said, no. It's either black or white. And so after a while, I'm like, you know what? I got to get rid of these things. So I just create visions. What I want to create in the year. It's kind of very similar. Some people say, well, it sounds like goals. I'm like, no, I just like for the year, I'm going to set, these are the things I want to be. And at the end of this year, this is the kind of thing I want to be doing and what I want to be experiencing. And that's the purpose behind why. And if I hit the goals, great. If not, it's fine. I'm going to keep, I'll keep working at it because I'm not worried about the time frame per se. I'm more about just let me get there. And whatever that time shows up, it'll show up when I'm ready. Because I believe, over time, I've learned that there's things called divine timing. There's life that gets in the way. There's, like this year, we're already in May. I was already supposed to be writing on my second book this year. I haven't wrote my first one yet. Again, it's one of the things where I'm kind of like, it's fine. I'll get to it. I just have other things that are coming up that I need to address. And then I'm like, once I'm a little bit more quieter in the mind, then I will create, because I know the book that I'm going to write will be more impactful for people and have more substance than me just rushing it out.
Yeah. Well, it's also important not to overextend yourself just for the sake of being able to cross something off the list, right? Like being able to put 100% of yourself into what it is you're doing. And when you finish that, go to the next thing. So I really like the idea of having a vision rather than a hard line in the sand that I have to get across, because it really is about the attitude that you bring to it, and understanding that if I did everything that I needed to do and this is as far as I got, then that's awesome. That's not a failure. But it takes so much work and just consistent checking myself to get into that mindset that this is okay. It's not a failure. This is a win. I succeeded. This is what I accomplished, and that's fantastic. And if I hadn't done anything, then I wouldn't be anywhere near this, right?
Well, it's kind of like, I have a vision of writing 30 books in my life, and I want it done by 62. But that's how I was before. Now I'm like, I'm going to write 30 books in my life. I have no idea when it's going to be accomplished, but I'm going to write 30 books in my life. And that way, then it takes the pressure off me, where I'm like, I don't have to rush to get to that, because I'm already, like I said, I'm 2 books behind already in my pace. But I'm like, it's fine. The books are going to come out. I have them. Like when I get really good ideas and I'm like, this is something I can write a book on, I put it in a little folder. I may write a little bit of what it's about just so I can have something to start with. And I'm like, okay, when the time comes, I will go in and write that book. But right now, I'm just like, it's one of the things where it doesn't stress me. And I made this choice about 4 or 5 years ago, where I threw out all my goals. I was the type of goal planner: year, quarter, month, week. I almost went, I didn't do day, but some things I did. And I was like, okay, this has to happen. I'm setting the pace. This is what's going to go on. I'm in control of my life. I'm going to do all this. And I just realized over time, I was so stressed out. It was one of the things where I'm like, I'm throwing it all out the door. My wife's like, you're not going to have any goals. Nope. Not doing any goals. I'm throwing out all my vision boards. I'm not doing any of those things anymore. She's like, okay. She's like, well, I know you know better, so I'm going to trust you on this. And I just set patterns. I said, hey, when I made the change financially, I said, hey, we're going to run a pediatric chiropractic office. That's my mission and passion. We need to help out these kiddos. Look what's going on. I said, we're creating it. She goes, okay, when do you want to do this? I said, I'm like, we're going to make the shift. We took a 6-month process to clear out some of the, our practice, to shift things around, get repurposed. Patients who just didn't fit the vibe for us, we're like, hey, you know what? If we can make this shift, great. If not, I can refer you to other chiropractors that, we better to serve you. They'll fit better for you. Long story short, when we got clear on the vision and everything, I mean, we all of a sudden went from like 3 to 5% pediatric patients in our office to 35% without doing anything in just 6 months. And that's when I started to understand how powerful the vision was, and just being clear and saying, well, I don't have a goal of what number I want to get to. I just want to have a pediatric practice, and I don't care about anything else. I don't want to listen to any other chiropractor who's out there doing 60, 70% or saying this. I don't care about any of that. I just want to run and have a dominant pediatric office. However it shows up, I'll learn what I have to learn. I'll do what I have to do. And within a year, we had it. We were at 40, 50%. We've been maintaining it for the last 3, 4 years. And it's been one of the things where I'm like, wow, I'm not stressed about this. I don't get worried if we're down to 38%. It is what it is. I'm running a pediatric chiropractic office, and that's what matters most for me.
Yeah, but you're living your dream. You're not measuring yourself by someone else's standards. You're self-aware. You're doing everything that leads to your purpose. You know, that's the whole thing. That's living intentionally. That's not just being in the passenger seat of life. You know, you're in the driver's seat and you're going where you want to go, and you're not going by someone else's map. And that's what it's all about right there. I am so proud of what you just said. That's awesome.
And I'm only sharing this because I know you're doing that.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
That's the
Exactly.
only reason why I'm sharing this. Just let you know we're kindred spirits on this.
Yep.
I normally don't like to talk about myself when I'm interviewing somebody else on my podcast. So, but I wanted to bring those up because I just wanted to show how we're very connected in that way. And it is important. You brought up a lot of concepts on that just rang really true to my heart. Where I'm like, yeah, see,
Mm-hmm.
he's doing. We kind of grew up in different elements, but we had very similar things. And then it's funny how we carry that on, and now we're breaking through that and doing what we love. So.
It
Um,
is.
Appreciate having you on and having you be able to share your story and everything that you're up to.
Man, it's been
Um,
good to be here.
Wrapping this up really quick, how can people connect, find your book, and all that good stuff that you have to offer?
Everything about me is on my website at jboydlong.com, Boyd. And I had to go that because there's an actor named Justin Long. He's the Mac in the Mac and PC commercials. So he's got the Google lockdown on the name Justin Long. So I went with my middle name. So jboydlong.com. I've got a blog on there with a lot. I do a lot of writing about all of this kind of stuff because it is near and dear to my heart. And all of my books are on there and all that kind of stuff. And you can get a hold of me through all that.
For all the listeners, as always, I'll have that in the show notes. Justin, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having you on. I appreciate the work. Appreciate sharing your story with the world in your book. I think we all have that story of somewhat in us, different ways, different elements, but we carry that on into our adulthood unless we do the work to break away from that and really break through that conditioning and programming. And so glad to hear that you're sharing that with the world. It's going to help out many people, thousands upon thousands, millions, and they get that word out there. So appreciate the work and appreciate you.
Thank you, Vic. I appreciate everything you're doing. And it's, it's not the things that happen to us, but I mean, we all end up with the same baggage. So I appreciate everything that you're doing to help overcome that. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, brother.